In this fortnight's episode, is there really a social contract binding all of us? What's in the news with stories on medical pot, NSA surveillance, and ignorant gun bans, and a herding cat segment on two huge upcoming events that you don't want to miss.
Welcome to The Lava Flow, channeling the flow of information to the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist, and agorist community. Find us at thelavaflow.com. Here's your host, Roger Paxton.
Thank you for joining me this week. Coming to you from the state that has the second oldest constitution. This is the show that will bring you the people, places, and events that everyone in the Liberty Revolution needs to know. You can catch me on Twitter at the Lava Flow Pod. This is episode 25, the I Didn't Sign It edition, and it's Tuesday, December 8th, 2015, when we've already had more than 1,050 people killed by police this year. What's wrestling my jimmies this week? You're about to find out. Let's do it to it. To start, I swear that when I shook Tom Wood's hand at the Feast of the Free Coast the day after Thanksgiving this year, that he was peering into my soul or reading my mind. Now, I know it to be true. Either that or Tom Woods must be COINTELPRO and he has a buddy in the NSA or something, because I had this segment already written and ready to record several days before he released his episode 545 titled About That Social Contract That I Never Signed. You can listen to his take on this topic at tomwoods.com/545. It's a bit different of a take than I take in this episode, so I encourage you to listen to his as well. If you don't listen to the Tom Woods Daily Podcast yet, then you should be. Now, this is an episode that is long past due, especially since so many Americans and people throughout the world believe in the myth of a social contract. Now, what is a social contract? According to Wikipedia, it is a theory or model originating during the Age of Enlightenment that typically addresses the questions of the origin of society and the legitimacy of the authority of the state over the individual. Social contract arguments typically posit that individuals have consented, either explicitly or tacitly, to surrender some of their freedoms and submit to the authority of the ruler or magistrate, or to the decision of the majority in our case, in exchange for protection of their remaining rights. In short, the social contract theory says that we as individuals have some sort of political or moral obligations to each other and to the government formed by us because of some shared contract, and that without this contract, there could be no civilized society. Now, this is where the statists get the idea that they can justify all manner of violence and coercion done by the state to individuals, such as taxation, conscription, victimless crime laws, etc. It essentially means that by virtue of being born in a specific place, you tacitly consent to the rules and the rulers of that place. And that by not moving away from that place, you further tacitly agree to this social contract. Now, let's ignore for a minute how difficult it really is to expatriate yourself from most countries, especially the United States, and assume that you could move to any country that you wanted to easily and cheaply. Does this make the social contract theory somehow valid? Of course not. Now, I choose to live in the United States, not because I choose their social contract over another, but because it is simply, at least to me, a more desirable place to live than anywhere else. Let's take an analogy for a minute. For example, I have to choose between either paying taxes or going to jail, as most people do. Just because I choose to pay my taxes instead of going to jail, this does not mean that I approve of paying taxes in any way, or that I consent to the act of being stolen from. It only means that I prefer to pay taxes than sit in jail. So just because I choose to live in the United States instead of moving to a less desirable country in no way implies my consent of any sort of social contract. So let's look at exactly what a contract is. According to Black's Law Dictionary, a contract is, quote, a deliberate engagement between two competent parties upon a legal consideration to do or abstain from doing some act. This is very clear. A contract must be deliberate. A social contract, by definition, is not deliberate. It is binding because of your non-deliberate act of being born in a certain place. A contract also requires engagement between two competent parties. Competent here implies willing and able. Were you competent of the social contract when you were born? Were you able to understand the social contract upon your birth? Were you willing to follow such a contract? Of course not. Now, as an adult, if you want to sign some of your rights away in exchange for some protection, that is absolutely your right to do so. For example, if you want to contract to live in a very secure location where your protection is guaranteed, but you have to give up certain rights or pay a tax to do so, then knock yourself out. However, to think that it is legitimate to force this decision on people who have in no way agreed to it is the end result of a social contract. Another aspect of a contract is that it's entered into voluntarily. This is generally handled in contract law by you voluntarily signing a document that lays out the specific details of that contract. However, I was never asked nor allowed to sign any document that showed my voluntary willingness to enter into contract with my rulers. I never signed the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, the Constitution of New Hampshire, or the city charter of my town. If a man brought a document into a court of law saying that the contract obligated me to pay him 30% of my income for life, the court would immediately ask to see the document and to search that document for a signature from me implying my consent. If there was no signature, the man could not then say that I had promised to sign it or that I should have signed it to make his case stronger. Nor could he say that because others signed it, that it therefore obligated me to it as well. The judge would laugh such a claim out of court, as he should. For this reason, anyone who says a social contract is legitimate should also be mocked. The fact that a contract, to be binding, must be written and signed by the parties to be held to that contract has existed in law for nearly 350 years in England, since 1677. Since we know now that the term contract means very specific things, then we know there is no legitimacy to a social contract. You can't just throw two words together and change the very definition of one of those words. By that, I mean that just by adding the word social to contract, you cannot change what the word contract means. Yet that's exactly what anyone who subscribes to social contract theory does. Another refutation of the social contract was made famous by Lysander Spooner. And anyone who listens to this show at all knows I'm a big fan of Spooner. Essentially, he said, even if the entire population of the United States originally agreed to the Constitution, and even if every single person in the United States at the time signed their name to the document to show their consent, they could in no way consent for anyone else who comes after them. They can contract for themselves, sure, but not for anyone else. As Lysander Spooner said in No Treason, the Constitution of No Authority, quote, they had no more natural right or power to make political contracts binding upon succeeding generations than they had to make marriage or business contracts binding upon them. To clarify Spooner, if my father made an agreement with someone to pay a debt, and my father does not pay that debt or my father dies, then I am not in any way obligated to pay that debt. What makes proponents of the social contract theory think that they have some claim to obligate their contract on succeeding generations when that is in direct contradiction to what a contract is capable of? Many people say that we imply our consent to the social contract if we vote. That is ludicrous. Many anarcho-capitalists and libertarians don't vote at all. So does that mean they're released from the social contract? No one who believes in the social contract would say yes. But, I do still vote, primarily in self-defense. I vote to preserve and to gain any amount of freedom that I can scrape from our illegitimate rulers. This in no way implies my consent to a contract. An analogy to this would be that if I were forced into battle, either by conscription or because war was on my doorstep, and I killed others to keep myself and my family alive, this in no way infers that the battle is one of my choosing, or that I agree with the concept of war. I find myself currently in a world where rulers have taken rights that are rightfully mine. I did not choose this world, nor did I choose the taking of my rights. So to preserve what rights I do still have and to try to take a few rights back, I use the ballot box. And it needs mentioning as well that if voting implied consent to the social contract, that must have left out minors who are too young to vote, or blacks and women who were not allowed to vote when this social contract was originally formed. So by this logic, minors, women, and blacks were not under any such contract. Trust me, if people were actually able to be free from our rulers by not voting, you would see even less participation in the polls than you see today. As Spooner said, quote, "It is plain then that on general principles of law and reason, such principles as we all act upon in courts of justice and in common life, the Constitution is no contract, that it binds nobody and never did bind anybody, and that all those who pretend to act by its authority are really acting without any legitimate authority at all. That on general principles of law and reason, they are mere usurpers, and that everyone not only has the right, but is morally bound to treat them as such." So what does all of this mean? It means that there is no such thing as a social contract. It is completely illegitimate. No one can be bound by a contract that they did not sign and that they did not deliberately agree to. Voting, paying taxes, being born, or living in a place cannot legitimize a contract in any way. The next time someone tells you that there is a social contract, tell them that you didn't sign shit. Have you subscribed to the Lava Flow on iTunes or any mobile device yet? Then what's wrong with you? Go to thelavaflow.com/subscribe so you don't miss a minute of the show. And while you're subscribing, make sure to leave me a 5-star rating and review the show to help others find our podcast. thelavaflow.com/subscribe.
What's in the news? The news you need to know from a libertarian perspective.
In more pot news this week, I just realized that I talk a lot about pot on this show. Talk about typical libertarian. Personally, I don't smoke pot, and I haven't in years. I don't care for the taste of it at all, and I don't like the smell of it. However, the reason I talk about it on here is primarily because it's a modern barometer of some semblance of freedom. Are we free to grow and consume a perfectly natural plant, or aren't we? If so, are we free to do other, harder drugs if no one else is harmed? These things matter, regardless of our personal opinion of these drugs. This is why I keep bringing the topic up. Not because I support drug use or do drugs myself, just to be clear. Having said that, in New Hampshire, a judge ruled that a woman who has late-stage lung cancer can purchase marijuana in Maine for her ailment. New Hampshire lawmakers approved the use of marijuana by people suffering from a limited number of diseases and medical conditions more than 2 years ago. But the first 4 dispensaries won't open until next year. Linda Horan, 64, says she might be dead by then and sued the state in hopes of getting an identification card that would allow her to purchase marijuana in Maine instead. Quote, "She is suffering from a painful terminal disease and is also undergoing therapy. There is no dispute that cannabis can ameliorate some of her suffering," wrote Judge Richard McNamara. Quote, "She will suffer irreparable harm if relief is not granted." Of course this woman should be allowed to use marijuana to ameliorate some of her suffering. She should also be allowed to use marijuana to get high. She should also be allowed to use it as part of her religion. She should also be allowed to use it for any fucking reason that she wants to, and so should you. In Who's Your Daddy news, in November, a 19-year-old Texas woman was arrested for selling drugs. When she was arrested and her apartment searched, police found 5 different types of drugs, packaging material, 2 digital scales, and a handwritten drug list in her bedroom. Among the drugs were 31.5 grams of packaged cocaine, 126 grams of high-grade marijuana, 29 ecstasy tablets, methamphetamine, and 60 doses of LSD. Dubbed the world's most adorable drug kingpin by media, it has now been revealed that the father of this woman is none other than a supervisory special agent for the, wait for it, United States Drug Enforcement Agency. Now, maybe if Dad had spent more time talking with his own daughter about the dangers of drugs instead of ruining the lives of countless people he likely arrested for drugs, this story would have a happier ending. The 19-year-old woman was released on a $38,000 bond after spending 1 day in jail. How much would you be willing to bet that this young woman gets a much lighter sentence than she ever would if her father weren't in the DEA? In I Told You So news, according to new documents obtained by the New York Times via Freedom of Information Act requests, the National Security Agency's mass collection of email communications likely continues using different methods which are apparently not restricted by the law. According to the report, there are 2 legal ways the government can still acquire this data. First, the NSA is allowed to gather Americans' data if it has been gathered in other countries. How do they do this? By essentially tapping into the fiber optic cables which power the internet between countries and across oceans. Secondly, the NSA may use the Intelligence Surveillance Act, amendments of 2008, which allows for warrantless domestic surveillance. Timothy Edgar, a privacy official in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence with both George W. Bush and the Obama administrations, who is now a teacher at Brown University, told the New York Times that, quote, the document makes it clear that NSA is able to get all of the internet metadata it needs through foreign collection. In episode 13 of this podcast, I said this about the USA Freedom Act, and I quote, my statement is this: if you honestly believe that mass surveillance is over, I have some oceanfront property to sell you in Arizona. So is anybody still looking for some oceanfront property? Because I've got plenty. And yes, the country has gone insane news. Cinemark, the 3rd largest cinema chain in the country, has banned Star Wars lightsabers and blasters from their theaters because they simulate weapons. The chain also banned face coverings and face paint, meaning that fans will have to leave their Darth Vader masks at home. AMC, another movie chain, has imposed similar restrictions. Obviously, this is in response to the Aurora, Colorado shooting during a screening of The Dark Knight Rises back in 2012. AMC released the following statement, quote, AMC does not permit weapons or items that would make other guests feel uncomfortable or detract from the movie-going experience. Guests are welcome to come dressed in costume, but we do not permit masks, end quote. Before you know it, our theaters will all have safe spaces, just like our colleges do. Now, this must be one of the most ridiculous things that I've heard in a long time. The theater that the Aurora shooting happened at was a gun-free zone. Real guns were not allowed in that theater. That in no way stopped the shooter. So only a fucking moron would think that banning lightsabers and toy blasters from the theaters is anything more than security theater, and in no way will make the theaters safer. This is the insanity that America is becoming. In Papers, Please news, starting in 2016, you may need your passport to fly domestically. Since the Real ID Act went into effect, some states refused to comply with the new rules, including Louisiana, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and New York. Depending on the waiver allowed in your state, if you live in one of these 4, you will have to start using a passport anywhere between January and October of next year to fly domestically. But if this affects you, then you'd better be sure to pay your taxes. H.R. 22, which has passed both the House and Senate and is expected to be signed into law soon, will set you up to have your passport revoked if you are delinquent in paying your taxes. Of course, this will affect anyone who wants to leave the country, and the roughly 8 million Americans who live outside of the country as well. Talk about authority overstepping its bounds. This is yet another reason why reasonable people feel the government is evil and has no right to exist in a peaceful, voluntary society. In some personal news, I just had to let you guys know that this show broke a couple of new records last month. My last episode, the free Uber edition, which you can listen to at thelavaflow.com/24, had my highest single release day yet. And the month of November was a new record month for the show with a 24% increase over my last highest month. Since January of this year, the first month that I did this show, through last month, the show has grown by a factor of times 10. And the year's not even up yet. Thank you so much to those of you who listen and share the show. Words cannot express how thankful I am for each and every one of you. And in life in New Hampshire really is this cool news. Like I mentioned earlier, you know you're in New Hampshire when Tom Woods just casually drops by your Liberty Thanksgiving feast party and hangs out for a couple of hours. It sure was cool to meet him. Exercise your free market muscles by going to thelavaflow.com/support and giving a per episode donation of as little as $1 an episode, or use Bitcoin. Get exclusive content, rewards, and help the Lava Flow become fiscally neutral while providing you more content. thelavaflow.com/support.
Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy.
Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs, well, that's another thing altogether.
Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
There are 2 events coming up next February that you really don't want to miss. They're on the same weekend, so unfortunately you're going to have to miss one of them. They're in completely different climates, so that could affect which one you choose. And I'm going to be at one of these, so that could affect your choice as well. Choose wisely and get your tickets now so that you don't miss out on the event of your choice. The first one is the 2nd annual Anarcho-Poco, which is being dubbed as the world's first and largest anarcho-capitalist conference by the event organizer and Anarcast podcast host Jeff Berwick. Quote, held yearly in Acapulco, ANCAPs from around the world gravitate to Mexico for 3 days of speeches, presentations, panels, debates, musical acts, parties, and networking with the intention of creating a freer world and 7 billion governments on Earth. It's being held from January the 18th through the 21st. Jeff has put together a pretty impressive group of speakers this year. Jeffrey Tucker, Doug Casey, Adam Kokesh, Larkin Rose, Roger Veer, Lauren Rumpler, formerly known as Objectivist Girl, Vit Jedlicka, the founder of Liberland, and many others. They're going to have entrepreneur workshops, media university workshops, a gala banquet, and lots more. The base cost for the conference is $195 for the entire weekend. You can add a la carte options, such as the gala banquet and roast for $95, the entrepreneur boot camp for $195, and other options as well. And this will all be happening in sunny, warm Acapulco, Mexico. You can get more information at anarcho-capitalist.com. And if the sun and fun doesn't do it for you, or you're just a glutton for punishment and want to spend the winter in the frigid north, or if you just want to see me in an event, you can always go to the New Hampshire Liberty Forum. Taking place from February 18th through the 21st, this yearly event is brought to you by the Free State Project and will be held in Manchester, New Hampshire, only an hour from my house. Needless to say, I'm probably going to be at this event. Now, they don't have all of their speakers lined up yet, so I'll be bringing you more information as it comes out. However, one speaker that was just confirmed a couple of days ago to be the headliner by video conference is none other than NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden. Now, who wants to miss that? I know I don't. For an all-inclusive ticket to this event, you can pay $359. Or there are many other options, such as a single-day ticket for $80. Or a ticket that includes all the speakers and panels, but no meals for $99. Now keep in mind that $359 ticket does include all 6 meals, from Thursday dinner to Sunday brunch. You can get all the details on this event at nhlibertyforum.com. I can't tell you how much validation it is for your beliefs and how much of an awesome feeling it is to go to a large event with lots of other libertarians. I've been lucky to go to many such events. If you haven't been to such an event, I highly encourage you to go. And if you choose the frigid north, you'll probably have the added benefit of seeing me. What could be better? Thank you for listening to the show this week. As always, I need to thank the highest value of my life, Jessica, for her help with this show, and Sheltered Life for allowing me to use their music. For the show notes to this episode, where I put links and other information that's been on this show, go to thelavaflow.com/25. Make sure to tune in next week where this atheist talks about whether Jesus Christ was a socialist or a libertarian. That's going to be a great Christmas special edition of the Lava Flow that you don't want to miss. The episode after that will be my 1-year anniversary episode, and also the New Year's episode. If you've got some great ideas for some things I could do for that anniversary/New Year's show, let me know at roger@thelavaflow.com or on Twitter @thelavaflowpod. I have a new iTunes review from Sean. Solid ANCAPs. Great podcast. I love the family view that he brings to an ANCAP world. Thank you so much, Sean. And if you like what this show gives you and you want more of it, and to keep this show ad-free, exercise your free market muscles by going to thelavaflow.com/support and giving a per episode donation of as little as $1 an episode using Federal Reserve notes through Patreon or Bitcoin through Coinbase. There are monthly costs associated with doing this show, and I need additional equipment to continue making this show better for you every episode. I'm sitting pretty at 36%, more than 1/3 of the way towards bringing you more content. Help me get closer to my first goal by going to thelavaflow.com/support. Until next time, keep striking the root.
Thank you for listening to The Lava Flow at thelavaflow.com. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe now at thelavaflow.com/subscribe. This has been a Pax Libertas Productions podcast.